Hey guys, today I'm looking at the Financial Times, who did an article on Ken Burns and his recent documentary on the American Revolution. The title of the article reads, Ken Burns, I'm embarrassed that, as a country, we don't grasp our history. Yes, here is the Financial Times article. Because it's behind a paywall, I'm going to be reading from the archived version of the article. Both will be available in the description below for you to check out. I thought this would be a good read today because I love history. As you've probably seen on my channel, I do fencing. And part of fencing is going back and looking at the manuals that have helped shape fencing history. Now, before I got into fencing history, I was really into the American Revolutionary War and the historical period surrounding that, which is why I plan to be watching Ken Burns' documentary. I completely understand paywalls, which is why I look for the archived version of the article. And that's what I found here at archive.today. Again, from the Financial Times, Ken Burns, quote, I'm embarrassed that, as a country, we don't grasp our history, end quote. The subtitle reads, the filmmaker is on a mission to strip the story of American independence of mythology and nostalgia. I think that what Ken Burns says here makes complete sense. See, growing up around 11 or 12, I watched the TV show Liberty's Kids. I was introduced to it through PBS. That TV show kicked off my fascination with and later love of learning and history. However, it is very much an idealized version of American history. It wasn't until college that I learned more about the horrors of the slave trade, that I learned more about the Three-Fifths Compromise, and that, no, things did not automatically get better for African Americans, let alone other minorities, after America was founded. The history of the United States needs to be taught, not shying away from the horrors that were perpetrated, but rather owning up to everything that happened, both the good and the bad, and everything in between. That's why I found this article so compelling. To the right of the title, we see a portrait of Ken Burns himself. Scrolling on down to begin reading. The American Revolution took place 2.5 centuries ago, but the battle over how to frame the story of the country's independence continues to rage. Step forward Ken Burns, king of U.S. documentary making. His prolific catalog, whose subjects range from baseball to the Vietnam War, has earned him many awards, including 15 Emmys. Now, the 72-year-old's new 6-part docuseries, The American Revolution, seeks to cast aside the, quote, mythology of cloying nostalgia, end quote, with fresh insights, he tells me. Contrast that with President Donald Trump's romanticizing executive order signed earlier this year to remove, in quotes, revisionist interpretations in museums and on monuments that question the, in quotes, the unparalleled legacy of advancing liberty, individual rights, and human happiness. Trump's Department of Education has forged a partnership with more than 40 right-wing organizations including the America First Policy Institute, Turning Point USA, and the Heritage Foundation. Quote, dedicated to renewing patriotism, strengthening civic knowledge, and advancing a shared understanding of America's founding principles in schools across the nation, end quote. As part of celebrations of America's 250th anniversary in July, on the White House's official America 250 website, Larry Arnn, president of the conservative Hillsdale College, compares Trump to Abraham Lincoln in his desire to make America great again. Sitting in a cafe in Lower Manhattan, Burns says of his new series, quote, I would call our perspective ... accurate. We always yield to the facts. History is really surprising. There is a neon sign in our office saying, it's complicated, end quote. Pausing here, inset into the article, we see an image of men in a variety of Revolutionary War costumes lined up along the side of the road with a cameraman facing them. And the caption underneath the photo reads, filming for the American Revolution takes in a reenactment at Monmouth Battlefield State Park, New Jersey. Copyright Mike Doyle. Back to the article. Burns has offered sharp criticism of Trump in the past, calling him, in quotes, an insult to our history. The revolution was associated with issues that resonate today: racial tension, inflation, violence, and an epidemic that sparked debates on the wisdom of inoculation. As Maya Jasanoff, one of the historians interviewed in the documentary, argues, it was the first American Civil War, with families and friends fiercely divided over the case for independence. Yet Burns says the launch of his series this year was coincidental and uncertain, the result of the vagaries of fundraising and production over nearly a decade. Quote, we started filming during Barack Obama's time, and it was unpredictable when it would come to fruition. It was a less conflictual time, end quote. While some might seek to view the documentary as a window on contemporary events, quote, we have to tune out the noise, Burns says. I'm embarrassed that, as a country, we don't grasp our history. Everyone approaches it from the arrogance of the position of how it turns out. We are all in the grip of the present, but if you point out the parallels, they are dated immediately. People are always trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, end quote. He certainly sees the American Revolution as a highly significant event in global history, with fundamental importance for his country. He points out that our cafe is in a neighborhood of street names that illustrate New York's continued connection to figures of the Revolutionary era: Varick, Lafayette, Thompson, and McDougal. The documentary devotes much time to diverse perspectives, including scholars working on the history of slavery and indigenous people. Sarah Weichsel, executive director of the American Historical Association, says, quote, for the general public who might not be avid readers of history, but are vaguely familiar with the Revolution from elementary or high school courses, this will be eye-opening. Burns brings it to life in ways that just text doesn't, end quote. Pausing again here, another image is inset into the article, this time a close-up of a cannon. And the caption below it reads, a still from Ken Burns' The American Revolution. Back to the article. Perhaps the most noteworthy insights emerge from a focus on Indigenous history. For instance, the documentary argues that the 6 tribes who formed the Iroquois Confederacy provided an example of democratic union that inspired Benjamin Franklin. But while the Loyalists defended many Indigenous people west of the Atlantic seaboard, albeit for cynically pragmatic reasons, the American patriots sought to push them aside, motivated in part by promises of 100 acres and $20 if they fought for independence until the end of the war. Burns stresses that although the Patriots are often portrayed as anti-colonial, in quotes, we Americans were an empire from the beginning. By the way, the word Americans is in parentheses. He says the use of the phrase, the, quote, Continental Army, end quote, revealed that, quote, we knew where we were going, end quote. Burns compliments his fellow long-standing co-producers and directors, Sarah Botstein, in parentheses, who joins us in the cafe, and David Schmidt. He stresses that the three work as a team, while conceding that, ultimately, he has the final say. In quotes, it's a benevolent dictatorship. Botstein agrees that, quote, while Americans have a collective understanding of our history of race, they do not appreciate the role of Native people, end quote. Other surprises she had while working on the series include the role that America's expansive landscape and extreme weather played in influencing the war. For instance, the thick fog in the Battle of Long Island in 1776 that allowed Washington to evacuate thousands of troops. At 12 hours duration, the American Revolution is intense viewing, without the powerful testimony of surviving participants, which made his series, The Vietnam War, in 2017, so compelling, or even early photographs to illustrate the Civil War, done in 1990. His latest work relies on military reenactments, lingering shots of maps, paintings, and landscapes. His slow camera rolls across images dubbed the, in quotes, Ken Burns effect, interspersed with talking heads of historians. He draws on many distinguished voice actors, including Kenneth Branagh, Meryl Streep, and Morgan Freeman. Pausing here again, we see another image inset into the article, this time of soldiers in military fatigues in a color photograph in the river in what appears to be a jungle area. And that appears to be correct, as the caption underneath that reads, a scene from Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's classic documentary, The Vietnam War. Back to the article. Burns rejects the suggestion that today's diminishing patience among viewers will limit its appeal. Quote, you could have said that with the invention of the telegram. Attention spans have eroded, but human nature hasn't changed, he says. The response has been binge watching, end quote. With his documentary and an accompanying book out now, and an extensive roadshow of interviews and presentations underway, he says, quote, I'm surprised we've got this far without the normal criticism. We think we've done a good job. There's a vast middle ground of Americans who are curious but ignorant of history. That's okay as long as you are curious, end quote. Although now into his 70s, Burns is hard at work on other ambitious documentaries about sensitive topics likely to spark controversy, from emancipation and Martin Luther King to Cold War history, with a focus on the CIA. Trump recently sought to remove federal funding from PBS, Burns' broadcaster. The documentarist stresses that he long ago cultivated philanthropists with varied political views who have funded the development of resources for educators and schools to accompany the American Revolution. He is sanguine about his own ability to raise money for future projects, but notes that, quote, the problem is for the next generation, end quote. His own children express concern about the existential crises of the current moment, he tells me. But he draws reassurance from the historical swings shown in his own past documentaries. Quote, I tell them, it'll be all right, end quote. Here ends the article. In italics below it, we see The American Revolution is streaming now on PBS in the US. Here on the PBS website, we see the documentary featured, complete with an FAQ and how to watch it. Please consider watching it. I know there's purchase options at iTunes and Amazon, but please consider supporting PBS in order to watch it. PBS needs our funding and our support. No, I don't have an affiliate link for you to go join PBS. All I have is my encouragement for you to please go support PBS. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. That's just the way it goes. A word now to the wise. The world was made to change. Each day is a surprise. I'm looking at life through my own eyes. I'm searching for a hero to idolize. Feeling the pain as innocence dies. I'm looking at life my own eyes. I take my heart into battle. Give that freedom belly rattle. Get my independent sign. Declare it on the dotted line. Let Philadelphia freedom ring and patriotic voices sing. Red, white, blue, never give up. You represent America.